Hello and welcome. You're watching Bloomberg Quint Live. Let's take a look at how the markets fared today. Well, this week, the market's poised with gains of almost 1%. You had Indiabulls Housing Finance as your top gainer with 10% gains. And through the week, you saw accumulation on the long side on the counter. IOC is the second top gainer in anticipation of the buyback. And then again, when the buyback news did come about closer to 4,400 crores of buyback, the stock moved up 3% in today's session. Yes Bank, 8% higher this week. Hero MotoCorp saw a move of 8% as well. Coal India, Eicher Motors, some of the other gainers. Amongst the losers, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories was stacked up right at the bottom of the heap after the US court put its stay in terms of launching Suboxone in the US. So that stock took a dip then. JSW Steel, HDFC, and you had an Adani Ports, which was down closer to 1.5% in trade this entire week. Taking a look at the broader market picture and what happened within the mid caps and the small caps, and if you could have a movement there about PC Jewelers, 24% gains this week. You had Max India, which was up about 28%. Bombay Dyeing, Canfin Homes, and the entire housing finance group actually did relatively well this week. So be it an Indiabulls Housing, be it a Canfin Homes, be it a Divan Housing, all of them stacked up double-digit gains. Amongst the losers, you have the likes of Reliance Nippon, Varun Beverages, V-Mart Retail, Jet Airways didn't do all that well this week, and double-digit losses coming in for IL&FS Transport and Bakrangi Limited. Moving on, you had the mid-cap index, PC Jewelers, Larsen & Toubro, Infotech, Dish TV, Future Consumers, Bank of India, Quest Corp in particular, double-digit gains coming there for the counter. The banking stocks, particularly within the PCA framework on the appointment of the new RBI governor, actually did start to see some bout of interest coming back in with the hopes of some bit of relaxation from the new governor. Emphasis was that one of the losers in the week, 1.6% lower, but the top loser again within the mid-cap, Nifty mid-cap, was Bakrangi, losing about 16.5%. Moving on, aside from that, the small cap index saw gains. You have a lot of stocks which are mixed, and you'll find them in most of the categories there. But a Kaveri seed particularly did well, 12% higher this week. Kalpataru Power Transmission, 12.5%. Amongst the losers and the performers on the downside, you've got a Graphite India, which was down 3.5%. Jet Airways, again, losses coming there. And Jammu and Kashmir Bank lost about 5% this week. Well, this week we were joined by Credit Suisse Neelkant Mishra, who talked about why there will be little change in fundamentals due to the outcome of the 2019 elections. Listen in.
From a fiscal perspective, what we have to keep in mind is that state government deficits are generally not an issue, right? Because of Article 293 of the Constitution, the central government controls every rupee that the states borrow. So if they end up giving doles, if they end up giving a lot of farm loan waivers, it will be at the cost of something else. So it's a resource allocation issue. It is not a fiscal deficit issue, right? Because the fiscal deficit mostly is capped at 3% for all states. This becomes a fiscal risk only if this behavior is accompanied by a very loose coalition in 2019, where each of these regional parties is actually a stakeholder at the center. Because what had happened in UPA 1 was that West Bengal at that time was incurring massive deficits, but it wasn't being allowed to because they were supporting the government at the center. Now that led to a lot of debt to GDP, a lot of interest payments, and of course fiscal deficit is just pulling forward growth, right? So you have to pay for it sometime later. So if this is followed by or everyone interpreting it as like, look, giving doles is the way forward, and we have to find new and creative ways of giving out dole, and this is followed by each of these parties coming together to form a government, then there can be some fiscal risk. But at this stage, to assume that the next 6 months is going to be, or 5 months is going to be all about, I don't think that should be, because it's too late for any government to act now.
All right, let's take a look now at what happened in the futures and options space. Remember, ahead of the announcement of the state elections, there were a lot of shorts in the system which actually started moving out, and because of which those 2 main days post the results saw a lot of the shorts moving out, and therefore the Nifty moving up. But taking a look at the distribution on the option side, so your maximum open interest distribution for calls lies at about 11,000, which now stands to be your next resistance level on the index, since we've already moved and made our way towards 10,800. On the downside, you have a fairly distributed support, so closer to 10,800 right to 10,700, but the biggest concentration lies at 10,500. But your immediate support then again falls at 10,700 and then 10,600. Aside from that, let's tell you exactly what the week looked like and what were the important headlines and the takeaways from this week. So let's start off with that, and the first day of Monday and what happened thereabouts on 10th. So OPEC cut 1.2 million barrels per day production, but this actually didn't do too much for crude oil prices, as there was an anticipation that there would be a slightly more larger cut. On the same day, Urjit Patel resigns as the RBI governor, which was a little bit of a shocker that came in, and the expectation was that the market would actually see a significant U-turn. But looking at that, the next day, the reaction came in tow with the state election results, which was in fact surprising to most, because we didn't see a sharp cut. In fact, to the contrary, we ended the day in the positive. So Congress won 3 key states, the Hindi heartland, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh and Rajasthan. That was the state election results. Aside from that, on Tuesday, you had the appointment of the new RBI governor, Shaktikanta Das. He was appointed as the new RBI governor. So the event risk and the uncertainty around who would take helm at RBI was also out of the way. On Wednesday, the 12th, Dr. Reddy's gained focus. Like we said, they were anticipating the immediate start sale of Suboxone in the US, but because the US court stopped Dr. Reddy from selling Suboxone, the stock took a dip in the session, almost 4% lower. You had CPI inflation numbers coming off 2.33%. IIP numbers as well came in, and they came in on the higher side at about 8.1%, which was an 11-month high. On Wednesday, the 12th, the SEBI confirms that it received whistleblowers' complaint against Sun Pharma. Remember, the stock has any which ways been seen a thrashing, went down all the way to levels of about 410 odd, moved up to 422, but they were seeing some reactions on the counter on the back of this confirmation from SEBI. Moving forward to the 13th, which was Thursday, TD SAT John's predatory pricing guidelines that favors Jio. So you did see some amount of action in the telecom space, not just yesterday, but even in today's session. And Yes Bank in particular gained focus in yesterday's session after it opened 3% higher, but landed up closing 6% lower, because expectations were that there would be a name to the MD and CEO, the forthcoming MD and CEO, but we didn't get a name, and it was pushed to Jan 9th. So, that was news that people were waiting for. It didn't happen, and the stock took a beating on that note. Today's session, the RBI board meet, obviously, which concluded, nothing material came out of it, but it was the first time with Shaktikanta Das at the helm that the RBI board meet happened. Aside from that as well, some news that took center stage in today's session was the Supreme Court dismissing pleas seeking a probe into the Rafale deal. So that was one bit of news that was covered. Aside from that, Supreme Court also put the sale of Fortis, 4,000 crores odd, to IHH. It put a hold on that. So Fortis Healthcare intraday trade plummeted 17%, but towards the end of his trade, finally picked up a little bit and closed about 6% lower. Wholesale price inflation came in today. That also eased out. I think 4.64% is where it stood at this afternoon. Well, let's take a look at what are the key levels to watch out for from our technical analyst for the day, Shubham Agarwal, and what he had to say.
Despite the correction, we didn't see the IVs going up, and that was the first indication that the market is actually giving a whipsaw, and we will see an overall reversal coming into place. Now the volatility index trades at a 2.5-month low, which gives us more cushion that this overall movement that we have seen in the Nifty is more sustainable. So this there is one more study of volatility skew, which is indicating that the call writers are only asking for a higher IV above the level of 11,100, which now seems to be an equilibrium, and that also stands as a target for the Nifty. But if you look at the movement that has happened recently, obviously Nifty is quite high, and even if you see the options activity, we have seen a lot of put writing happening around 10,700. So my preference would be, even though the overall view on the Nifty remains positive, for a target of 11,100, but if I have to build a fresh trade, I would wait for a pullback around 10,700 if at all we do see a dip happening on the index in a day or two, and that would be an attractive level to re-enter for any longs with a stop loss at 10,650.
All right, and before we wrap up this wrap, let's move on to what are the key events to watch out for come next week. So nothing much happening on Monday and Tuesday, but on Wednesday, minutes of Urjit Patel's final MPC meeting as RBI governor comes out. So that's going to be key and crucial to watch out for. Aside from that, you also are going to be closely watching out for what's coming out from the US. So you have the FOMC rate decision and Fed Chairman Powell's news conference. So that's going to be a key trigger for the markets. ONGC on the 20th of December, the news came out today, is going to be considering a buyback. The quantum of the buyback obviously is awaited, and the price at which the buyback happens is something that you're going to be watching out for. Bank of Japan rate decision, Governor Kuroda's briefing, all of that happens on Thursday the 20th. Bank of England also, the interest rate decision comes out on the same day. So a lot of things to keep an eye out on. And Friday, finally, President Trump has given a threat of a partial government shutdown by the 21st if an amount of $5 billion is not given in terms towards the wall, where the Democrats are saying that they are going to only be able to provide $1.3 billion. US Q3 GDP is seen rising at 3.5%. You will see the numbers coming out on Friday the 21st. So it's crucial to keep an eye on what's been happening globally as well. And on Saturday, the 31st GST Council meeting will happen in Delhi. That's coming in from ANI. Well, with that, it's a wrap on this week's market and how it performed, as well as what all there is to watch out for next week. Thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint.